Okay, let me share my slides. You still can see it, right? Okay, so systematic literature review and meta-analysis. And the focus of today's menu.
Kuimaliza fast hivyo na ugali ulikuwa mkubwa. Naona mpaka huyu anakomboleza kabisa. Umeiona? Sio majani ya kunde haya wewe. Hii mnafu.
Please, you're in class. Stop talking nonsense. Unless we remove you now. Okay? Mute yourself. Mr. Ivod, I've made you the co-host. Try to mute these guys. Okay, so let's get started now. Okay, so okay, so what is a systematic literature review? Now, systematic review is conducted according to scientific, clearly stated scientific research methods, and therefore is designed to minimize biases and errors inherent to traditional narrative reviews, okay? So in a sense, we are doing we're doing literature review systematically following some scientific approach, okay? So the main focus of it is to reduce or to limit systematic biases by attempting to identify, to appraise, and synthesize all relevant studies or whatever design that we are trying to study from various studies in order to answer a particular question or sets of questions that we're interested in. Yeah, so that's one way to define what we mean by systematic review. Now, it might be very useful to give you some contrast. That is, a traditional systematic review is a process for assembling, arranging, and assessing existing literature in a research domain. We shall see what we mean by a research domain later. But in this process, the assembling involves identification, defining the literature review domain in which you will be more into, looking at your research questions, the source type and quality of your the material that you're researching, but also the acquisition of the papers that are to be included in the systematic literature review. And therefore, in this, we will do it systematically, and we'll show you how to do it systematically based on some models and inclusion and exclusion criteria that are normally followed when you are doing your systematic review, okay? Now, of course, the final step of a systematic literature review is to set foot for future research or further research, gap identification, but also publication of literature, also to give suggestions for theoretical development, among other issues, which we shall look later. Now, following this process, researchers are helped to meet several goals, mainly to one, to provide a comprehensive picture of what is known in research domain, by defining its scope overview, identifying inconsistencies, and their probable explanation, and then developing a framework to summarize previous research. That is the first goal. The second one is to provide directions for future research based on what is known in what or in a specific research domain. So this is very useful for people who want to publish papers. This is also very useful for people who are doing PhD and those who are doing masters in their research. Now, why one should write a systematic review? As I said before, you have to know, you want to know the past in order to understand the future. You also want to understand where it is and where it needs to go in the future. Okay. So these are some of issues or directions and purposes around why we write a systematic literature. Therefore, in the systematic review, there is that systematic process of searching literature using keywords, for example, to identify papers for inclusions based on specific criteria, which we shall see later, in order to come up with some objective literature that can be objectively used for different purposes. Now, these methods that are normally used to identify and select literature are normally explicit, which means they're clearly known, they are reproducible, and they are without a priori assumptions on relevance of the literature selected. So that's very important to note. They are also more comprehensive. They have fewer biases in identifying the current status of knowledge, but also they have a narrow focus in terms of research questions for consistency's purposes. And as with all research, the value of systematic review depends on what was done, what was found, and the clarity of reporting. Now, there are types of literature. Literature review methods. You have the traditional narrative literature review. Then you have the systematic literature review, in which you may have the quantitative, then you have meta-analysis and the meta-regressions, which we shall see later. And I'll walk you through some examples and how to do it in some good software which can help you do this very easily. Okay? So if we were to put it in a plane, you would compare it, for example, the narrative and the quantitative review, for that matter. Let me pick a pointer here. Okay. On one hand, you have the traditional narrative literature review, and then on the other extreme, you have meta-analysis and the meta-regression. And in the middle, you have, which is a go in between, quantitative systematic literature. Okay? So we'll look at this and how we can take advantage out of this. Okay. So the other way is to look at the approaches of literature review. You have the systematic, the semi-systematic, and then the other one, which is more of integrative. Okay. So they differ in terms of purpose, research questions, strategy, etc. Okay. But the systematic review, which we shall concentrate more on, synthesize and compare evidences. That's the main purpose, as we have discussed before. It is specific, as I said, within a specific domain of literature. It is systematic in a sense that it is following a procedure which is reproducible, which is an a priori procedure. That is a set of procedures that before you start implementing the process.
Unajua arrows ni kama vile agents ambayo wanafanya kazi kwa niaba zile za usajili pamoja na kupangia meli kwa ajili ya ukaguzi. Sasa wale arrows wanakuwa nje ya nchi yako.
Okay.
Unaona? Sasa
okay, so the analysis is also quantitative. That's the analysis or the evaluation. Then the examples of contribution would be, for example, evidences of effect or effect sizes. They would normally be used to inform policy and practice, as we shall see. And then, of course, there's semi-systematic, in which there's a combination of both quantitative and qualitative in nature. But the research questions are normally broad, etc. I'll be speaking and then muting people, which is very awkward. This is wasting our time. What we can do. So hard to turn. Very difficult. Then, okay, let me just move, maybe because of time. So some key characteristics of systematic review. Normally, you have a clearly stated title and objectives. Then, of course, comprehensive. You have to have a comprehensive strategy, which I'll show you later. To search for relevant studies, both unpublished and published. There's explicit and justified criteria for inclusions or exclusion of any study. There's also clear presentation of characteristics of which study included, and an analysis of methodological qualities, for example, but also a comprehensive list of all studies excluded and justification for exclusion, of course. There's also a clear analysis of the results of the eligible studies. Normally, after which we do some statistical synthesis of data. We may do some meta-analysis, as we shall see later, if appropriate and possible. Of course, there are many types of meta-analysis which we shall look at later. There's the classical meta-analysis, then there's meta-regression, there's semi or structural equation modeling meta-analysis. All these are ways of quantifying the results that you get out of your systematic literature review. So you can decide to use your systematic literature review for different purposes, as we shall see later. But we have both of which, quantitative or qualitative. You can even do qualitative synthesis, in which case you'll be developing a conceptual framework or theories, propositions, or any gaps that you might identify in your literature, which you're going to synthesize and put them in tables. And then, of course, you may publish those for other people who want to do PhD or who want to do some other research. That's one bigger possibility, okay? So normally we produce structured report of the review, which clearly states the aims, describing the methods, the materials, and reporting the results that you have gleaned from your systematic literature review, okay? Next, there's a clear analysis of the results of the eligible studies. Some statistical synthesis of data are done, etc. Or even qualitative synthesis in terms of themes that you extract from literature and produce a structured report. Now, what is the significance probably of the systematic reviews? One such possibility is that normally when you want to make informed decisions on some aspects in business, in education, or any area of your concentration, we know that there are many published work, articles, etc., etc. So we cannot base our decision on one article or two, etc. We would normally want to do a systematic literature review on these articles, studying on a similar issue. You may have maybe 10,000 articles or 50,000 articles. For example, if you go to Scopus and all these other publishing outlets. And then we apply this systematic literature review procedure so that you come up with a few which are the best, and then make some analysis out of it, extract data, make some synthesis, and then use that informed consent or informed synthesis or outcome of that literature to make some practical decision in real life, in real application. So I'll show you how we go through that. But also the other significance of systematic literature review, which I'll be simply noting it as SLR, it minimizes biases because it's more scientific method of summarizing literature, okay, because of the protocol that you will have to follow in order to determine which study are to be included and which one are to be excluded. But also, why, we ask ourselves, why a systematic literature review necessary? Of course, the volume of published material makes it impractical for individual researchers to remain up to date on a variety of common findings. Therefore, for people who are doing research, you want to uncover gaps, they need to do this. But also there are conflicting results, conflicting conclusions. Some people find negative relationships, some people find positive relationships, some people do not find any relationships. So there are also issues with sampling and all these kind of things will all necessitate to do a systematic literature review so that we come up with a unified conclusion on what we are trying to synthesize and study. So the focus mainly is to provide a comprehensive overview of literature related to themes and concepts, theories, methods, and to synthesize prior studies, okay? Now, these are some of functions of systematic literature review: identifying, summarizing, and evaluating current theory and methods. You want to identify methodological problems and gaps, to provide much needed evidence for decision making, as I said, to keep yourself up to date to the fields, justification for further research, for example, for educational institutions or even research organizations, like, for example, REPOA and the other organizations that are involved in research, okay? To reduce uncertainty by a rigorous methodology that is comprehensive, transparent, and explicit, and which leads to minimized biases and which is reproducible. So in a sense, that would create some trust in what you are reporting as outcomes out of your literature review. And I'll show you how we are going to report all these. Why writing systematic literature review paper? Well, it can be part of a PhD journey, identification of gap, research contribution, some reputation, of course, in academic, for those who are from academics, some high citation index, etc. So all these have their significance in the academic realm. So we need to note that also. Now, the systematic literature review really includes 5 main area around which we may review. So first, you have the domain-based review. Then you have the theory-based review. Then you have the method-based review. And then you have the meta-analytical reviews, and then you have the meta-systematic reviews. So these are the types of systematic literature review. Okay? Next. My slide is stuck. I'm sorry, let me try to refresh it a bit. Okay, so the first one is, okay, let me go back. Where is my slide? Okay. A small interruption, I'm sorry. Okay. So, okay, let me get to this. There's no problem here. Where is my PPT? Share screen. Yes, coming. Okay, I think I was on slide number, I don't know where. It's here, somewhere here. Right here. So these are the domains. I mean, these are the systematic literature review types. So the first one, as we said, is the domains-based review. Now, this one synthesizes studies in the same research domain. Now, a domain is a specific area around which you are researching on. It's not necessarily a discipline. A discipline will be bigger, but a domain will be like, for example, if you're coming from finance, that will be, let's say, for example, stock markets, or maybe capital structure, that would be a domain, okay? So in this case, you are trying to evaluate diverse perspectives, which would normally allow authors to describe the state of the art of knowledge in that research domain and identify use path for research. So within this type of domain-based review, there are several types of domain-based review before we even go to theory-based. Okay, so we have, for example, here, structured reviews. Now, structured reviews focuses on the development of research domains such as associated with theories, models, constructs, contexts, and the methods, okay? In which case, the author uses tables and figures to provide structured insight into a research domain, all right? This will be an example here. The role of privacy in marketing. I'm just drawing this example from an article by Martin and Murphy, 2017. I'll provide some link below for some of these articles where these guys have done a systematic literature review within that domain, that is the role of privacy in marketing, and they published that article, okay? So in this case, for example, the author identify and define various privacy-related constructs that have appeared in recent literature. And then they examine different theoretical perspectives, which are brought on privacy topics related to consumer and organization. Okay? And then these foundations normally lead to what we consider as a systematic review of privacy-related articles of a clearly defined date range. Okay, so there will be a systematic way of searching these articles and then processing the information out of these articles. Okay. So out of this, the authors are able to describe the state of the art of knowledge regarding privacy in marketing and identify use path for future research. Okay. So that's a typical example there. Okay. That's one. Number two are called framework-based reviews. Okay. Now, framework-based reviews are papers or reviews developed using a classic organizing framework, which scientifically synthesizes information, as you normally read from the paper by Paul and Benito's, which I have the link below at the end of the slides, which I'll share with you. So for example, they're using a framework. So there are many frameworks around which you can organize your literature review, your systematic literature. For example, you have the ADO or ADO framework. You have the TCM framework. You have the TCCM framework. You have some combination. You have the 5W1H framework. And all these references there. And I'll show you some example of which. So for example, the ADO, that's the antecedents, decision, outcome framework. So you can take this framework and apply it in your domain in which, or in your topic in which you want to study or to mine some literature. And a typical example is used by Lim and the others in 2021, which is a recent article, but also Sodergren, also it's a recent article also. Then you have the theories, context, and methods. That's the TCM model. That's the short for theory, context, and the methods framework by Paul et al. That is also 2017. This is also a framework. The other one is theories, constructs, characteristics, and methods. That's CCM framework by Paul and Rosado. Now, all these are frameworks. The other one is what, why, where, when, who, and how. That's 5W1H by Lim, 2020. So these are some examples of those such frameworks. Now, there are many frameworks, okay? Many from different disciplines, but these are the commonest ones that are normally used to structure systematic literature review. These four ones, okay? So these frameworks can help authors to deliver the highest level of clarity and coverage, that's breadth and depth, in their review. Therefore, framework-based reviews are often more useful and impactful than other types of reviews in this type of domain types of review. So this is the example of the ADO framework, antecedent, decision, outcome. So which means you start with the organizational factors, for example, in each of the articles that you are perusing. You also look at individual factors. You look at decisions. So for example, adoption, investment, strategic decisions, etc. And then you look at outcomes in those articles, for example, financial results, competitiveness, implementation success, organization of innovation, for example, or institutionalization of innovation, etc. See, these are outcomes. So you look at your article, each of the articles that you'll be going through along those lanes, okay? That's a framework, okay? Another example would be this one. For example, you read an article by, this article here, in which you have the application of the ADO, in which through the review of the various literatures within that domain, the authors were able to glean the following objectives, for example, business expansion, accelerated entry to new markets, collaboration of expertise, technology transfer, increased productivity, et cetera, Then these were the decisions. And then these were the outcomes. See? So within that domain, yeah. So this is what also part of what the author would normally report in their articles and normally find relationships that, or they'll be able to comment on relationship between, for example, decisions and outcomes. Are they positive? Are they negative? What are the magnitudes, etc. See? So that's a framework. It's not a model. Don't confuse. That's a framework for reviewing your systematic literature. I mean, your literature in a systematic way. So that's one example. The other one would be this one. And an exemplary article is by Bultrago and the others. You look at theories on that specific domain, various theories discussing, for example, structure. What are the contexts? You try to classify the context. Is it only firms, for example? Country, maybe? Are these country studies? Then you also look at, for example, characteristics, like, for example, are they studying firm performance, new products, et cetera, And also in this group, what are they studying? GDP maybe, per capita, et cetera, And then this will be your methodology. What methodology are they using, etc. Is it panel data, binary response models? And of course, you'll give some statistics for how many articles are doing which, have found which, or are using which variable, etc. So that is a framework of TCCM, okay? So those are a few examples, but the other ones, of course, the 4W1H, 5W1H is another typical example in which you can use to review your literature, okay? Now, next, you have what you call as bibliometric reviews. In this one, they entail analyzing bibliographic data of published literature by using, of course, some statistical tools. Of course, the focus there is to study some features and characteristics of course, bibliography. That's the authors, the publication outlets, etc. Such kind of information. Now, in this one, you are actually looking most extensively, you are trying to do some visualization to see some similarities, to see some differences in terms of publication, etc., and all this kind of stuff, okay? So you highlight some trends and produce some overview of what people are studying.
Hello, madam.
This area, okay?
Good evening. I'm good. I was looking for you. Yes.
Okay. So in this, this has been used extensively by different authors. So these are some of the articles that have been published over years by different peoples. But the main focus is to analyze topics, subjects, themes, journals, and the educational institutions, etc., that are involved in publications. So that's bibliometric, okay? Then you have some hybrid review, which combine elements of different review types. For example, some reviewers supplement a bibliometric review with a structured review, etc. So these are some of the examples also in which people may combine bibliometric with another maybe framework-based review to simply add value to your paper. Okay? They have conceptual reviews. Now, conceptual reviews aims for theory, models, or propositions, or development in research domain. Okay? So this is an example of such conceptual reviews. But in conceptual reviews, we have these examples. For example, the 5-dimensional models for sustainability marketing by Lim. That's a conceptual review paper. The 4-dimensional model for marketing in emerging markets, the framework for customer engagement, the integrated model for sustainable consumption, etc. All these are some examples, for example. Okay? Then the 10 P's framework for integrated care. All these are domain-based review. So you review according to a specific domain, but within a conceptualization under which people are studying different things. Then you have coming back to the main, the major types of systematic literature review. The second one is now the so-called theory-based review. Yeah? This one simply examining the development of a specific theory in a review domain. We might, for example, look at the transaction cost theory, or any capital structure theory, or any theory from human resources. And look at its development over time. Okay, these are some of examples of such reviews. Gilal et al., for example, they did a theory-based review on self-determination theory in marketing, okay? But also you have Hassan, they did also on theory of planned behavior in consumer research. Okay, so these are some of those examples. So theory-based review explore the development of specific methods, theory, sorry, in a review domain, okay? So these are some further examples, okay? So theory-based review papers synthesize and extend a body of knowledge of literature that uses the same underlying theory, okay? So it could be, for example, transaction cost economics, resource-based theory, or anything of such theory, okay? Then you have the third type, which are method-based review. This one explores the development of a specific method in a review domain. And these are some examples. For example, crowdsourcing in consumer research, et cetera, okay? Then, okay, this is, okay, these are some repetitions. These are some examples. You just read them. And then you have the meta-analytical reviews, which is what we're going to focus on also as part of this. They focus on statistical assessment of prior research in a review domain. Now, out of which you have a systematic procedure underpinning literature reviews, which enable researchers to identify all relevant factors and studies in that review domain. And then you quantify those findings systematically, either by classical meta-analysis or by meta-regressions, etc. Okay, these are some examples. These are some examples, okay? So the meta-systematic reviews simply, okay, this is the fourth one, the meta-systematic reviews. This one consolidates existing systematic reviews in a review domain, okay? And these are examples. Now, the goal, of course, is to introduce a new theory. As in this paper, for example, by Lim and Weisman, they wanted to introduce a new theory, and therefore they had to do some meta-systematic reviews and come up with some contribution, and they were able to build the theory. Now, in a summary, these are major contributions of systematic review paper. Of course, as said, they resolve some definition ambiguities. They are also important in evaluating existing methodological approaches. They develop conceptual frameworks to reconcile and extend past research. They also describe research insights. They also describe existing gaps. They also identify future research directions, okay? So this is an exemplary article. You might also go through it and read it. It's a good article. Now, how contribution is achieved in literature review? First, the research domain in which you are trying to study needs to be well suited for that review paper, which means you have to have a sufficient corpus of literature to make integration and thesis valuable, especially if there are some theoretical inconsistencies between theories and some heterogeneity of effects, which might be sources of trying to develop models to explain those, which we shall see later. And second, the paper must be well executed with an appropriate literature collection and analysis techniques. Third, the manuscript must offer significant new insights based on multiple studies. Okay, then this is also some summaries of added value of literature review papers in a nutshell. Some empirical insights, for example, a synthesis of what is already known and maybe what is not known. And then, of course, the main outputs will be, these are some examples. For example, the state of knowledge, gaps in literature, weaknesses of methodologies used, for example. In terms of methodologies, overview of dominant methodologies used, pros and cons of methodologies used. In terms of theories, you look at overview of main theories used. These are some main outcomes that will be reporting in the literature, in the paper. The impact of theories used on results, potentials for other theories, etc. There are also gaps in literature and the research agenda, main gaps, avenues for future research, and then relevance for real-world applications, that's policy applications. Now, when you identify all these gaps and all these things, you also have to identify or make a discussion on overview of knowledge available for real-world application, policy implications, etc. Okay. Comparisons between countries, for example, and what are the implications? Okay. Then, of course, you're expected to produce a conceptual model. It could be a scheme or a figure representing the conceptual model, or overview of which not well founded and underpinned by the literature. So you tend to summarize those and put them in a conceptual diagram. Now, this is a simple framework that is expected in literature review article, a formulation of questions, research questions, how the literature review is done, inclusion, exclusion criterias, appropriate data, etc., that were extracted, the quality of data, and then the validity, how you did the synthesis, and then interpret and report the data. Now, this is one such example of frameworks that are normally used in systematic reviews, of course, also in meta-analysis. So this is one particular example, but there are several other examples of such frameworks that can be used in a systematic way, okay? So Prisma is a preferred reporting item for systematic review and the meta-analysis. Now, this one mostly is used in medical sciences, that's Prisma, and is simply showing how you did your systematic literature review, okay? For example, what database? That's identification. Which database did you search? Did you have some additional records identified through other sources, for example? So you indicate this is also supposed to be reported in the literature review paper. Okay. So, for example, from this database, in this example, you say, for example, you're able to extract 32 papers. In some other additional sources, maybe one paper. And then after reducing some duplicates, etc., how many were reduced? Maybe 16. And then records screened, records excluded, maybe 4. Full text article assessed for eligibility, maybe 8. Full text article excluded, maybe 4. One was editorial, the second one maybe was a review article, maybe another one is just an abstract, etc. So this is simply a process which you would normally follow. And then at the end, you come up with, for example, a total of 8 studies that you would normally now go to extract information from. You can do that quantitatively, maybe through meta-analysis or some other means, okay? So that's a framework, but there are many. There's this also modified Prisma. So for example, this is a particular specific study somebody did and adopted Prisma. And then in his reporting, he showed how he did his systematic search, okay? For example, he was able to identify 409 articles from databases, okay? And then 8, which he used or he searched manually. And then after removing duplicates, etc., then there were 294, okay? Then after screening some records, these were excluded. For example, thesis, those literature which were thesis or dissertations were 3, pictorial was 1, conferences, abstracts, presentations were 5, etc., etc. Or maybe non-Australian, if the focus was to focus, of course, these guys were focusing only on articles published in Australia on that specific domain. So you exclude those and you show how many were excluded and what were the reason. That's the exclusion criteria. And then you come up to here in terms of eligibility, full text article assessed for eligibility, 259. And then these were further excluded. Maybe one was a book, maybe somewhere conferences, etc., etc., etc. These are some criteria that were used to exclude them. Then studies that were included in qualitative synthesis. So after excluding all these, he was able to remain with 20. So in his study, using this systematic approach, he was able to come up with only 20 studies, which sorry, again, we had a breakdown of Mtandao, so let me try to get back on it. Okay. So this is another example. Okay. This is another example. This is another example. And this is one particular example, which is, of course, a different protocol, which is not Prisma. There are many protocols around which you can organize your literature review. But I'm particularly interested in this one, which is more related to business studies, okay? Which is the SPA4 SLR protocol, okay? Now, assembling, that's the first main chunk. Then you have arranging, and then you have assessing. Now, within each of these major blocks, you have subgroups of steps. So within assembling, you have identification and acquisition, of course, of the literature. So here, for example, you'll be looking at things like what is your domain? That's the area, the outlet, or the topic. What are your research questions? What, how, where, etc. The source, journals, which ones, source quality. All these need to be there. Is it from Web of Science? This is one of the biggest search engine. I mean, publishers. Is it Scopus or ABDC list of journals, etc. All these. Then acquisition, the search mechanism and material acquisition. Are you using Google Scholar or which ones? Emeralds maybe, Elsevier. The search period, are you searching between 2000 and 2020? You have to specify all these. Search keywords, which one are you using? You have to indicate. I'll show you an example, a practical one. The total number of articles returned from the search, etc. And then arranging, that's where now you look at the organization and the purification. Are you organizing your search based on which framework? Is it ADO? Is it TCM or TCM or 5W1H? That's the organizing framework of your literature. How many articles were excluded, for example? You have to report the number and some reasons, of course. How many were included, etc. Then the last step is assessing. That's the evaluation, the analysis method. Are you using bibliometric, content analysis, or meta-analysis? Of course, if it's for qualitative review, are you using content analysis or thematic review? I mean, thematic procedure in qualitative methods, or are you using meta-analysis, which is quantitative in a sense, or bibliometric? Agenda proposal methods, best practices, and gaps analysis. You have to indicate those, okay? Now, lastly, you have your reporting. The reporting conversions of course, require that you put them in figures, tables, of course, words. Some limitations, of course, need to be stated in terms of the data types, the review types. Of course, then, of course, you need to include the sources of support, expertise, how many people are involved, for example, funding, if possible. All these need to be put. So that's as powerful SLR protocol. Okay. Okay, this is for Prisma, which I'm just skipping. And then here, of course, is a simple trend from Scopus on the increasing popularity of publication of systematic literature review article, of course, from 2000 to 2021. So you can see the increase is exponential. So it's a very fruitful area. People need to consider this angle, okay? Now the process of systematic literature review. Technically, you look at what? That's a qualitative process for assembling, arranging, and assessing existing literature in a research domain. You look at why, that's providing a comprehensive structure of what is known and processing directions for future research. Of course, particularly this is a framework for the I mean, it goes hand in hand with the 5W and 1H, okay? Then when, that's the research topic, is evolving to allow researchers to provide a current view of what is known and define the future direction of the research domain. Then, of course, where we expected to include all relevant studies from high quality journals, etc. And then the how, okay? Now, this is, of course, a review protocol. It's an example about which we've already looked at this. Then you have, maybe, let me go through this one very quickly. This is a review protocol in a sense of what you would normally write in your systematic literature review article. That's, you'll have your research topic, which need to be narrowed down, because the objective, the search terms that were used in your systematic search, the eligibility criteria, of course, years considered, was it 2020, maybe 2010 to 2022, maybe. The language, did you search only articles from English speaking or French or Chinese, etc.? All these publication status, where how many were published, how many were unpublished, your information sources, databases, and those which were acquired manually. Then study selection processes, the screening, example, abstracts, screening, downloading the full text eligibility of these studies. Did you include empirical studies and quantitative or only quantitative studies? Data collection processes, okay. Of course, you may need to use some forms. Did you, of course, because you're following some procedure, in which case you'll be keeping a log of how many are you excluding and what are the reasons? How many people are involved? One person, two independent researchers, etc. These need to be reported. Data items, lists, and define all variables that you are trying to study. You can quantify them in a table. Then final data collection. How many people are involved? One person, two independent researchers. Of course, this is not primary data collection. This is secondary data collection, specific data from literature review. Okay? I'm trying to find a way to mute this guy, but I don't see where. This is a bit. Can't be muted. What's wrong with this?
Dr. George, please mute your voice.
Okay, so this the same outline that I was saying, but in a more compact form. Okay, these are the things that we've been discussing, and then I need to go to something here. You must formulate a search strategy. So you start with scoping search, which is more broad. Now this one helps you to determine if there are enough articles out there to perform a systematic review. It helps to determine if your topic might be too broad. It helps to develop a list of relevant keywords, etc. It also helps you to identify relevant databases. You also need to combine keyword search with controlled vocabularies, etc. And all these issues that you need to consider. But what is important, you need to document everything that you're doing, okay? Now, you need to break down questions or research questions into parts or concepts. That's very important. Before you start your literature review, you have to have research questions. You could have 3, 4, or 5, etc. Those which are manageable. Okay. And then, of course, you need to have search keywords for searching. You have to have your synonyms. You have to have your abbreviations, related terms, differences in spelling. You have to be aware of that between American and English, British, etc. Identify the main topic areas. Yeah. Define your inclusion and the exclusion criteria, etc. So these need to be there, and this has to be, it's an iterative process, really. Okay. Now, I want to take you to some specific example. How to convert research topic themes to searchable keywords. Okay? For example, you have this topic, globalization. Okay, so for example, you have globalization of Chinese companies in the 21st century. The main topic of inquiry could be globalization. Okay? The angle of research could be, for example, firm or companies specific. Okay? Because some studies might be focusing on countries, or maybe other spheres of concentration, but then you might decide the angle of research is from firm or companies, and you may need to specify a focus, for example, China, because you're focusing on globalization of Chinese companies, so be focusing on China, or if it is a globalization of African companies, that the focus will be Africa, etc. Then 21st century, that will be the time period of interest. And then creates a list of synonymous or related terms and alternative terms for each of these search terms above, okay? I mean, these are criteria that you're trying to find your topic. So you might put it in this way. globalization of Chinese companies. That's your topic. So on one hand, you have globalization, because globalization with the difference in spelling. That's a distinction between American and UK English. Then you might look at some other synonyms or closely related words, like, for example, integration, etc. Then Chinese or China, that would be your focus area. Then firm, corporations, corporation, company, see, all these are possibilities. Then the wording of 21st century could come in terms of 21st century, or this way, or this way, or this way. See, you have to be intuitive and creative so that you are able to capture as wide as much as possible the kind of literature that you're trying to capture. Now, this will be sort of an example of a search strategy, okay? Let's say, for example, you are trying to study, to filter between concepts that you are searching, okay? You might use Boolean operators, okay? This one represents union, the second one represents subtract, the second one represents intersect, which means if you're using the OR operator, that would give you everything from both ends between two words that you're combining. If you're using not, that will mean it will exclude all of this one. If you're using intersection, then it will simply include from both arms of the literature that you're trying to search, okay? That will be and. So I'll give you a specific example here. So if you're using and, or not, or you could even use these signs, plus or minus or exclamation mark mean the same. So let's say you're searching, your topic is actually finance and investment, okay? So if you put finance and investment in a search box, that should give you both finance and investment. But if it's finance or investment, that should give you any study that is studying on finance or investment. So this is bigger and broader. Finance, not investment, then this will give you only study that are from finance and exclude investment. Then you may need to create a search strategy grid. A search strategy grid. I've lost my page. Where is that? Page. Let me go. Okay. Now with this one, you may, maybe before I go to this, let me just show you some practical examples from one search engine, let's say Google Scholar. So you go scholar.google, and then this one. So what you do, let's say we are trying to look at finance and investment. Normally write finance and investment, okay? Which means it will simply include all articles that has the word finance and investment together. That's and. Okay, so you have finance, investment, all through. And then if we use or, because you have to understand the way search engines works. When you are searching, normally they don't consider prepositions like and, or, etc. So these ones like or, and not are especially, they are normally used to as part of Boolean operators in search engines optimization. Okay? So if we say finance or investment, that will give you all papers that are talking about investment and all papers that are talking about finance. So you have investment, and all those which are studying investment and finance together. See? So you have finance, public finance, so finance, etc., etc. So I think you get the idea there, okay? Finance, investment. So it's either they are both included or any of the two is included. That's using or. You can use not, in which case you just want finance, but not investment. Yeah? Now, of course, some search engines may not behave well with the use of not, okay, in this way. So that will depend. For example, this one violates that. Even the use of exclamation mark is violated here. So let's pick another example. Let's say from, you can try that from other search engines, like for example, Emeralds or probably what? JSTARS or even Scopus, etc. Okay. What is this one? Okay, let me go back. Scopus, okay. Maybe because of time, you get the idea. You get the idea. So let me just move on with my presentation here because time is running out. So you'll have to have a search strategy grid, in which case you have a question or topic. So if you have several research questions, let's say you have 3 research questions. So each research question will have its own grid that is being developed. So for example, here you have the first term that you are searching, and then you have to identify alternative terms this way, vertically. Then you have to identify related terms that will go by or. This could extend downward, okay? And then you need to have, let's say the second term. So that might go the first term and the second term. So that would be, for example, finance and investment. You could also have the third term, let's say finance and investment, and let's say maybe lending, okay? Then this way you have or, etc. This way you have and. So that will be your search grid and process through which you'll be following to facilitate your search process, okay? So you need to have a checklist in which you'll be indicating what alternative vocabularies are used in discussion. Are there American and British variants of spelling? Can you identify a word stem, for example, for truncation? I'll show you sometimes later. So that you can capture, when you're talking of child, for example, if you're searching child, maybe you're studying about children. So you have child, children, or childish, etc. How do you combine those in one way? Are common abbreviations or acronyms or formula used? You have to also look at those. There are certain abbreviations which are common. What specific cases or examples are you interested in? General terms, are there categories that you want to exclude, etc. So that's something you need to look at, okay? This is another example, the way you would normally do. Let's say, for example, globalization, not internationalization. You want to exclude internationalization. Maybe you want to search Chinese and China. And then maybe you want to search, you want to combine different concepts probably. Okay. So you may use search tricks and techniques like these ones. You can use truncations, for example. You can use star. You can use asterisks. You can use companies. I'm sorry, I'm talking to somebody here. So, okay. So there are certain tricks that you can use. Okay, so for example, let's look at some few practice here. Let's go again to Google Scholar, which is probably popular and free for most. And let me show you quickly how to do that, and then we'll move to something else. Okay. So let's say you're looking at our two topics, our two ideas. That's finance and investment. Okay. So you might go finance. You write finance, and then because there are many possibilities, you could write finance, financial. Then you could write financing. Now you want to capture all articles that have all these. Maybe you have investment, and then you have investment. You have invest. Then you have investing. Now, to avoid all this, there are ways of simplifying this, okay? So what you can do, you just write finance, and put a star. That means it will bring all articles that has finance, financing, financial, etc., etc. So let's try this, for example. So you have finance, financing, etc. Okay. Or maybe you're looking at investment. So you put a star. Actually, it's a star or a dollar sign. Okay. So to bring all those have investment or investing, if they are there, okay? Let's look at some other examples. If, for example, you are finding, maybe you're searching globalization. So there are two possibilities. With a Z and with an S. So what you do, you put an exclamation mark here in between. So to bring all those which have globalization with a Z and those which have an S if they are there, okay? So all possibilities will be drawn depending on which type of English they're using, with a Z or with an S, etc. Okay. You can even use brackets, such for example, you say financial performance. Maybe you want to distinguish financial, employee performance from financial performance or other type of performance. So you can have financial performance and maybe investment. So which means this will focus on particularly articles that have financial performance as one group, okay? And also investment. But if we put O, as you know, that would tend to bring anything with financial performance and investment, or only financial performance, or only investment. See, that's the idea there. So everything will be brought there. So you can investment, maybe you can also talk of in terms of stock market. Maybe you want to be specific. You're talking of equity investment. So you write equity investment, for example, equity investment. I'm not sure if I've written this properly, this word here, equity investment, investee. Okay, this one. Okay. So those will be some possibility, but then of course we put and here. Those are possibilities. You could also use quotation marks. Okay. Quotation mark. That also will give you something very clear, okay? So those are examples around which you can work when you are searching. Now, coming back to our, our PPT, yeah, hoping that you can see them. So you can use asterisk or the dollar sign, or you can use the quotation marks in a certain specific phrase, etc., etc. You could also use word cards, for example, symbols like question marks. Like, for example, globalization here, you mean to bring words with an S and those with a Z. Women, for example, you want to bring both women and woman, so you may write.
Don't see slides, doctor.
Different. That will also work, yes. These are some examples, okay? You also have to go through multiple databases. A single database is not enough. So there are multiple databases, like, for example.
We can't see slides, doctor.
Yes? You're saying what?
We can't see
We can't
slides,
see the slide.
We can't see the
slide.
Yeah.
All right, let me go back again and try to share. Okay, I hope you
the
can
slide.
see that. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Now you can
Yes,
see.
doctor.
Okay.
Yes,
So you can see that. Okay, these are examples of databases, like, for example, Scopus, which is very big and comprehensive. EBSCO, ProQuest, Web of Science, PubMed, Google Scholar, of course, but it's not very big. But always Google Scholar will lead you to other databases. You have also other publishers like JSTOR, OECD library, Scopus I've already mentioned, Wiley Online Library, and all these, Emeralds, SSARN, EBSCO. Try to visit some of these. They have a lot of papers. Of course, some are free, some your universities must subscribe, but it's something that you can explore depending on your field, okay? You have some more here, okay? Springer, Wiley, Oxford, University Press, Taylor and Francis, Nature, Sage, Palgrave, etc. Okay. In case you have some difficulty identifying journals, you can go to the ABDC journal list, which can be downloaded. Of course, it's a document, huge document. Simply write ABDC journal list in the Google, and then they'll give you a list of journals and where you can search them individually and go and try to see what is there, okay? And then, as I said, keep a search log so that you know where you got your information, of course, for control purposes, of course, for reporting purposes. A search log would be something like this, for example. You can use Excel to maintain it, keeping your dates, the database that you visited, the keywords search, the search word that you used, because this is some work that you'll be using, you'll be doing for quite some times, maybe a month, you're doing this. Keywords, maybe this is what you search, board diversity and firm performance, board or gender and the firm performance, etc. What were the results? How many did you find, etc., etc. So you're keeping this. And then you can do what we call as forward search or forward searching. Once you have identified some relevant journals or articles, an easy way to find more studies by looking through the reference list. So you go to the reference list and do what we call as backward search. So you look at the list and search backward. All right, because each article will have articles listed in the reference list which are closely related to what you're reading in that article. Okay, so that is what is called as backward searching. Then there's what is called as forward searching. Now, in this case here, you're looking at papers that have cited the articles since they were published. Okay, which papers have cited that article since they were published. Okay, so this can be done very easily through Google Scholar and many other related systems, okay? So this will help you find new studies that are building on the current studies that you are looking at, okay? Then you need to keep up with the literature, in which case, almost all databases you need to know, or almost all databases and publishers provide one or more of the following alert features, for example, table of contents, TOC alerts, citation alerts, keywords alerts, but also you have academic social networks, which you can use, like, for example, ResearchGates, among others, okay? Some social networks, LinkedIn, of course, Mendeley, of course, which is also useful for management of your references, ResearchGate, academia.edu. You also have OCID, in which case you can get your OCID for free and register there and put your publications if you have any. And then, of course, you'll be getting some periodic information in case there are new articles that have been published. Okay? We have already talked about this. There are different types of gray literature, which you also need to consider. For example, annual reports. By gray, we mean it could be not formally published literature. Theses and dissertations, conference abstracts, for example, and proceedings of conferences, working papers, evaluation reports, fact sheets, and others. All these are sources of literature, which you would normally classify them as gray literature, okay? Of course, there are some advantages, of course, of including gray literature in your systematic research, access to a wider variety of information, reduction of publication bias, which we shall be discussing later. They contain more local information, which is important for planning, of course, and for policy. And then there are some published, of course, reports like UN reports, etc. So there's a lot. That's what we would say from this slide, okay? Of course, there are challenges which you need to be aware of, database biases. There's no single database is going to contain all the studies that you need to get. There are also publication biases. You have to be aware of it and report it in your publication. Publication bias, for example, selective publication of articles that show positive treatment of effects or any statistical significance. That could be one example of such biases. So it's important also to look for unpublished studies through manual search and the other means in order to reduce the publication bias. Okay? And then English language bias, that might occur, for example, if you're only searching articles that are from English-speaking publishers. There are citation biases. This one occurs when studies with significant or positive results are referenced in other publications, compared with the studies with inconclusive or negative findings, okay? So you may have that bias also. So these are key steps in the systematic review methodology. For example, as a way of sort of making a recap, you have the topic formulation, which must be very clear, of course, which can be quantified through objectives and research questions. And these are examples of research questions. For example, you could have, what is the current state of research on collaborative internationalization of SME? That's an example of a research question. The second one could be, what are the theories that underpin research on SME collaboration, collaborative internationalization? What are the antecedents, mediators, moderators, and outcomes of SME's collaborative internationalization? What are the implications for future research? See, these are research questions for your systematic literature review. And these are things that you would normally report in your article. And these are things that will guide you in your process, okay? Then establish the scope and boundaries of the review, of course. You specify the relevant problems, populations, constructs, settings of interest, as we said. Study selection process, okay, which would involve study identification, screening, and selection process, as we discussed before. Then you will have to have your data analysis, okay? Is it going to be purely descriptive? Is it going to be quantitative, etc.? That will depend on the focus of your study and what you are trying to do. Then in terms of reporting, you have the key aspects. You have tables, figures, and the narratives, okay? Then you have, of course, you'll have the results, the core results that you need to report, and the insights, revelatory insights that you were able to bring out of your investigation, and then the implications for future research and possibly policy, practice, and managerial implications. So the practical applications of the SPA4 systematic literature review protocol, which is mostly used in business studies, which is actually the short for scientific procedures and rationales for systematic literature review. You can read this article, which is very informative on how to implement this. But in a short, as we discussed before, you'll have the assembling, which would normally include the identification, including the domain, the research question, etc., etc. Then the acquisition of your material. Then the arrangement, this organization, are you using which model? Or not model, are you using which framework of organizing your literature's review? Then the purification. And then lastly, the evaluation and reporting. Now, this will be what will be reported as in a nutshell in your article, okay? And then this one here is a typical example of the application of the what we can do with this. Is this going to open? We have to stop sharing. Okay, one moment. This is not working. Okay, my link is not working. Anyway, let's just go back there. Okay, I'll just share this in the group possibly later for easy of communication. This is another example, and in this example, the review is based on brand personality, BP, brand personality, be in marketing. These are research questions, okay? What is known about consumer digital brand personality perceptions in terms of theory? That's your research question. What is known about characteristics of consumer digital brand personality perception, etc. So these are your research questions that will be leading. But at the end of this, you have, why do we need more research on consumers' digital brand personality perceptions, and where should we be heading? Okay, so this is one typical example, and that would be step one. And therefore, this is
technologies in important removal.
This is an example of a specific output within an article, in which case these people, that's Paul et al. 2021, they were studying about brand personality, and therefore in their reporting, they had to report based on this SPA4. The domain, for example, you have to show that's consumer brand personality perception in digital context. Okay. Then what were the research questions? Just list them here. Okay. Then the source types, peer-reviewed journal articles. Okay. So he's basing on the peer-reviewed journal articles. Then source quality, he's using the CABS academic journal guide. Okay. That would be his source of quality. Then you could give some more information in terms of identification. Let's say, for example, years, range of years, etc., etc., or which specific context you're dealing with. Then the acquisition process, you have the year here, the range, the search mechanism and material acquisition, maybe Web of Science, the SWS, Scopus, EBSCO, etc. What were your key search or keyword search or search keywords, okay? Are you using brand persons with a star, meaning brand personality, brand personal, brand person, etc. with this combination? So that's why you have to keep a log, so that at the end of the day, you'll have to report what keywords you used in your search, okay? Total number of articles returned from search. For example, in this case, they were able to retrieve 385 articles from Web of Science, from Scopus, 518 articles. So you can see it's a bulk of information. You have to systematically screen it down. And then from EBSCO, 357, total 1,260, okay? Then your organization, how are you organizing them? In this case, they used TCCM framework, but also, so it's a combination. They used also the antecedent dimensions consequences framework for the methodology, okay? The purification, then you have the information there. How did you arrive at your final sample? Then the evaluation. For example, in this case, they used content analysis and thematic analysis, okay? Then agenda, proposal method, thematic gap analysis. Then the reporting conversions, they were using TCCM framework, okay? So in which case they were able to derive future research agendas. So the limitations are there. Source of funding, no funding received, okay? So that will be a typical example. So it's important to note the list of data to be extracted from article should be agreed upon a priori, that is before, okay? And then you proceed with your study design and collection. And then this is what we've gone through actually, data collection. You have to have an Excel sheet in which you keep, now this is not a log, but this is actually an actual data collection sheet, in which case you'll be putting your articles. For example, you may have the year, country of the studies, comments, the objectives or questions, the methods that were used, how many participants, that's this, the evaluation, the findings, which themes were you able to extract, see? So you go through all your, let's say, 10 articles or 20 articles. Out of that final sample of articles that you were able to come up with systematically. Okay? Then you may do some quality assessment when you are actually excluding and including articles for analysis. Are the aims and objectives clearly stated? Is the research design clearly specified? Was it appropriate for the study? What about the methods, etc.? So these are some of those quality assessment questions, which you can also find them from Greenhall and Taylor, 1997, which can assist you in the process, okay? Then in data synthesis, Once you have your data extracted and the quality and the validity assessed, you may need now to pull your information into some summary, into some themes of outcomes or effects, etc. So you may find a way of classifying your heterogeneous data qualitatively by coding them and grouping them so that you may report them consistently. Of course, you can use some software for qualitative data analysis like Atlas or NVivo, which you are not going to cover in this, but we're going to show you how to do that for quantitative. Was your data quantitative or qualitative or both? So you have to include some important studies characteristics, important studies results and conclusions, which are contributing to the review. All these information need to be there, okay? All right. This is another example of research questions, which I'm not going to go through. These guys had 6 research questions. And they were able to do the systematic literature review, okay? But they were studying about environmental sustainability in higher education, okay? So they had 6 research questions. But at the end of the research questions, remember always, as you can see the pattern in these research questions and the previous 2 sets of research questions, at the end of each of these research questions, you're asking yourself the limitations and directions for future research. Okay? All right. These are the steps that you would normally go through, which I'll not walk you through, but you just read these, okay, later. That's the filtering process, okay? That's the filtering process. And then the analysis, okay? In their detailed analysis, they came up with 82, okay? And this is what they came up with based on their context, okay? And these were the themes that they were able to extract, okay? I mean, in terms of process, that's the process, okay? But these are the actual typical themes that they were able to extract based on research question 2 and 3, okay? These are the questions. These are the themes that they were able to extract, okay? This is just an example. This is for question 4, etc. And then you can summarize your information this way, as I discussed before, okay? This will be paper 1, for example, and all these are the information, the key findings, etc. Paper 2, so these are samples. Then you need to draw some conclusion from the analysis, okay? In terms of, for example, the concepts of environmental sustainability. And then the role of social media in environmental sustainability, etc. And then these are the elements that they analyzed. Okay, so the actual findings, if you need to get them, they are in the article that they were able to publish. Okay. So, as a note, you need to realize that systematic literature review is a bit of a hassle, but it's paying and rewarding, okay? Maybe before we move to the second part of our discussion, if you have any questions, I would like to handle those. And then we move to the next part, in which case we'll be discussing meta-analysis. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Saganga, I have a question. Though I have been on and off due to internet connections, but I catch some question with me. Maybe you answered them earlier, I don't know. If I want to say I have prepared I'm in the report stage currently, and I want to publish one of the objectives in my study.
Yes.
Shall I be correct? Maybe say I take one of the objective and use, for instance, ADO to publish my study. And if that is true, then is this mode of ADO allowed in every journal, or the journals which will not accept that format? Thank you.
This is it's popular in most journals. There are specific journals that would normally, not necessarily specific, but most journals would normally have, not actually, I'm not talking of journal, publishers. Well, even journals may even specify that they are accepting articles that are based on literature review. Okay, so they would normally say these are conceptual papers, for example, or literature review based articles. So as long as you can demonstrate and offer citations, because that's a method that is popular and is used by most people, it's always acceptable. What is important is to bring new contribution and new knowledge, but also the suitability of your framework that you're using. That's what is very key there. I hope I answered your question. So
Sure.
on your, maybe your thesis, your PhD, I don't know, because this is it's a systematic literature review. So to what extent your PhD is including the relevant studies, because you might maybe need to go through and search afresh studies that are within that angle, and or maybe use only those studies that you already have in your PhD and try to fit yourself within that framework. That is a possibility, but as you have seen, the process would normally require you to dive into a lot of literature and screen them down. So let's say, for example, you're studying something in auditing, and you go back and search afresh. You might find new articles which are not even in your thesis. So that is okay. That could be a way of publishing, finding new avenues for further research. Okay, so that's that. Now let's move to, I think, the next one. We have what we call as meta-analysis. Now, meta-analysis, I'll just go very quickly, and then I'll go to practical session where I'll be demonstrating how to do it in a software. I'll just expose you to the concept of meta-analysis and meta-regression, and then I'll quickly move through these slides because I know you'll have them sometimes. So we have meta-analysis. Yes.
Doctor?
Yes.
There's a question in the chat, please.
You have what?
Question from the chat. There's a question.
You have questions here?
Box.
So here is saying you have a CPU candle. Okay, let me go through these questions here. I don't know which was the first one. Shaban is saying, I cannot see, voice is very low. I cannot hear. Then there's a question down here. Okay, so
Question from Asifui Kando.
Asifui Kando. Okay, so you're saying in the systematic literature review, you begin with the domain-based review, whereby you can use ADO, etc., which consists the theory aspect. Then why going in the second stage to theory-based review? I do not understand the question. Maybe try to rephrase it. What is the question actually? It's too worded.
Yes, doctor. My question is.
Yes.
It seems the domain-based review consists the aspect of theory. And according to your presentation, you said there are, in terms of systematic literature review, normally contains domain-based review, theory-based review, methodology, and the meta-analytical review, and meta-systematic review. My question is,
yes,
my understanding is that if you can properly review using the domain-based review, which contains the theory. For instance, you use the framework, for instance, ADO, TCM, SEO, whatever. It seems they are having a theory. So it seems there is no need of going again to the second stage. That's what I have conceptualized in your presentation, Doctor.
Well, maybe the idea, I don't know if it was very clear. Probably you did not get it very well, because we have domains. Yeah. Here we're discussing about these ones here. Let me go back here. We have domain-based review, theory-based review, method-based review, and meta-analytical review, and the meta-systematic review. So in the domain-based review, your focus is the domain or an area. See?
Yes.
Okay. Theory, that means your focus is you're trying to study theories. You're reviewing theories. Okay. Maybe you're focusing on theories. Yes.
Maybe let me chip in and add up on one thing.
Let me finish with this guy, answering him, then we will, I'm trying to move. That is making a lot of noise.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Somebody is speaking, please. Let me finish this first, answering this question, and then I'll allow you, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so we have Meki Manyama, please shut down your voice. You're disturbing us, okay? Then I'll have to remove you, okay? So let me get you. Okay. So, okay, what we are saying is that we have domain-based review, theory-based review, method-based review, etc., etc. These are focuses of systematic literature reviews, or types, really. Okay, types, but these are focuses. But so in domain-based review, for example, you are reviewing within the same domain or the same angle. Okay. So within domain-based review, you have several subtypes. You have structured review, you have framework-based reviews, see? The framework-based reviews are, for example, the ADO, TCM, TCCM, or some hybrids, some combination of ADO and the TCM, or 5W1H. See, so framework-based review is part of domain-based review. Okay, And then, so these were the examples. Then we talked about bibliometric review, which are also part of domain-based review. Then hybrid reviews are also part of domain-based review. I hope you can see the main title there. Then you have conceptual reviews, which are also part of domain-based review. And these are examples. And then now moving away from domain-based review, you have what we call as theory-based reviews. Are you following? Now the theory-based reviews, now you have, for example, these as examples. The focus is the development of a specific theory. Now you are confusing theory-based review here and somewhere here, where are we? Overall and structured review or framework-based review, because these are not theory, these are frameworks, okay? And then theory-based review, that's the second type, okay? In here, we have discussed that. And then you have method-based review, okay? That's another type. And then you have meta-analytical review, then you have meta-systematic reviews. So that's what we were saying. So I guess you have the answer there. Yeah. Francis, you had a question or something to say?
It wasn't a question, but to add on what you have said.
Yes.
Maybe people could be mixing between meta-analysis and the systematic literature review. When you talk of the systematic literature review, is how you'll be making reviewing of various publication or papers.
Now that's what I'm going to discuss now.
In building up your study. For example,
hello, Mr. Francis.
When you say or when you talk of the
Francis.
Yes.
We haven't discussed the meta-analysis, so now we are discussing now that. So
okay,
to have that contribution later. So let me just go through this one first.
Okay, let me wind up there. So, for example, when you talk of the let's say methodological literature review, means you are when you review paper, you look at the papers which discussing the methodology which you intended to use in your study. So when you go to the paper, what you are going to look there is just the methodology. So what these papers has discussing about study methodology which you intend to use in your study or which you are using in your study. Or when you talk of the theory,
okay, yeah.
What you are looking in the paper, particularly the theories which you intended to use in your study. So what this paper, what this paper have said about the theories which you are using in your study. So that's the thematic literature review. So
okay.
Is how you build your literature review concerns with your studies. And when you go to the paper,
let's save time now because we only have 1 hour and I have a lot to go through here. Thank you for that note. Maybe let me just go through here now. We have meta-analysis. What is that? It's simply a statistical technique for combining the results of independent but similar studies to obtain an overall estimate of treatment effect. Because these are called effect sizes, or ES, effect sizes. Okay? So in a sense, it's a quantitative method in which you are extracting information from different studies. So you may have study 1, study 2, 3, 4, 5, up to infinity. You may have 10 study, you may have 20 or whatever, okay? So that will be the number of studies that you're involving in the systematic analysis. But you need to note that looking at these arrows, okay? Meta-analysis rely on a systematic literature review. So it's coming from systematic literature review. That's why you have to understand the systematic literature review first, and then move forward to what we call as meta-analysis, okay? So comparatively, you could say, while all meta-analysis are based on systematic literature review, not all systematic literature review necessarily include meta-analysis. Why? Because you can just do a systematic literature review and then publish your paper based on what we have discussed, or you can extend your systematic literature review into meta-analysis and publish your paper. Or you can just start with meta-analysis, but actually using systematic literature review methodology, which we have discussed there. Those are five or four types of systematic literature review. Two of them were dealing with meta-systematic literature review, etc., etc. So that's the point there, okay? So systematic review, as we know, is a research methodology that tries to identify, select, and synthesize all research evidences relevant to a specific research question, okay? So as we said, not all systematic review will yield a meta-analysis because some studies may be too heterogeneous to combine. So you may probably need to split them and group them and do something else, maybe do some qualitative analysis or something. But we know that every meta-analysis follows a rigorous systematic review. So studies must be sufficiently similar, not the same, but similar regarding, for example, populations, comparisons, outcomes, and etc. So that you may be able to pool these studies in a systematic analysis, okay? Well, these are some of the information trying to explain what we mean by that. But I'll just reserve those for you and then you'll read them later. But some importance of of meta-analysis. First, there's power to detect summary effects, replicate, and also to persuasive reviews, okay? Then there's test of moderators. You can do that, especially if you are subsequently going to do some moderation analysis. Then you can identify moderators or even mediators, which we shall cover in tomorrow's and the day after tomorrow's lecture. You can do some sensitivity and bias evaluations. You can gain citations, of course, without using primary data collection, okay? Now, of course, also you need to realize that we're in the age of big data. You have huge amount of publications, okay? Huge amount of data, empirical data from published works. Now, this is a systematic way of combining this volume of data into something that can be processed and be made meaningful for the audience, for the audience to consume. Yeah? Then, of course, is the idea of velocity. Somebody is talking. This is very difficult to read. Then there's the idea of variety. Accumulated diversity of results needs directed interpretations. So, for example, you may have some studies with negative relationship, some with positive, some have no, some are significant, some are not significant, some are from different contexts, etc. So that is very important. It can be quantified and re-summarized through meta-analysis, okay? So some benefits here is the idea of precision. There's the idea of synthesis. There's the idea of heterogeneity. That's applying meta-regression analysis to examine drivers of the variability of study outcomes, for example, or the dependent variable. There's also the idea of reliability, okay? Opportunities of meta-analysis research. Of course, there's knowledge accumulation because you're combining evidence from many seemingly conflicting primary studies. By primary studies, I mean the actual studies that were done by other researchers. These are papers, articles that were published. Because with meta-analysis, you'll be drawing data from these studies. Then you create a store, of course, of accumulated knowledge. You're also estimating overall population level effects, sizes, which is the main objective, of course, of meta-analysis. And then, of course, you're contributing by disaggregating and finding sources of differences and biases in different findings within the same domain. See? In terms of precision, of course, meta-analysis is able to handle sampling error, which is another critical issue, which we shall see technically later. All right. Sampling errors may come as a result, of course, from random deviation from overall populations when we draw samples, okay? For example, by selecting a set of firms, in which case, for example, the larger the study, the smaller the sampling error, of course, as you know. And the more, of course, when you, for example, you have several studies with smaller sample sizes, that would normally increase the sampling errors. But when you're combining more studies, means that the sample is larger and therefore the sampling error is reduced. So we'll be reducing sampling errors from all these other studies. So meta-analysis combines the power of many studies, both positive, negative. Sampling errors are averaged out, and therefore we come up with some consensus. It's a way of pulling studies which is more precise at a relatively low cost. Okay? Of course, we are able to make some identification and correction of publication biases among published works. Okay. For example, there are studies that are not published. In meta-analysis, we normally include them. There are studies that lack statistical significance and therefore they're not published. There's also issues of selective reporting. All these can be handled within this framework, etc. Yeah? Especially now, you know, meta-regressions allows to identify and even filter out publication bias using statistics. Therefore, meta-analysis contributes to transparency and increased credibility of empirical research results. Okay. Now, these are opportunities which I'm not going to go through. You just go and read these through. Corrections for model misspecification biases. It's going to be handled by meta-analysis, especially when the different primary studies are pulled together. Okay. Then you have, of course, the exploration of heterogeneity, which is probably one of the most important angle here. We know heterogeneity, which is variancy, which is inherent in many empirical research, where study design and data selections are widely different. For example, somebody's using, for example, even within regressions, there are many types of regressions. Okay? Some people might use fixed effect regression. Some people might use random effect regression or GLS, etc. So all these, or OLS, different estimators will bring different estimation or heterogeneity estimations. Now, when they are combined through meta-analysis or meta-regression particularly, we are able to come up with pooled effect size, which could speak for the whole body of literature that is talking, that is concentrated within that study domain. It could be, for example, the effects of let's say, for example, diversification on capital structure, you see, or something like internationalization on firm performance. Now, the heterogeneity in methods, in study designs, and all this kind of stuff can be quantified through meta-analysis, okay? So, meta-analysis helps to resolve conflict in the literature by helping to identify and determine important moderating factors. Okay? So we are able to capture these through moderators that could be established. Okay. Then there's, of course, theory advancement. If you want to have some theoretical advancement and contribution, we'll be able to test different or alternative competing theories on an aggregate level. Okay. So, for example, meta-analysis of structural equation modeling will allow comparing complex theoretical models, et cetera, but even univariate meta-analysis and meta-regressions can be designed to take care of heterogeneities and variations, which can be argued for theory advancements. Okay. Predictions and benchmarkings, of course, for theory, for policy implications and utilization, for managerial implications. All these are contained, can be gleaned or harvested from meta-analysis, okay? So if you want to establish best practice in business, in entrepreneurship, in any angle, in education, meta-analysis is one of the best ways to combine studies and make predictions about certain behaviors or certain performance within a specific domain. Okay? And then, of course, we are able to do evidence-based decision-making, as I said before. So meta-analysis will bring into light the most current and state-of-the-art knowledge, which could be applied to specific areas by practitioners, by politicians, by decision makers, policymakers, etc. So all these are great opportunities for meta-analysis. Then there's clear contribution, of course, through aggregation of empirical studies, okay? This will give a unique advantage to those who are studying or analyzing studies through meta-analysis, okay? Now, there are types of meta-analysis. There's what we call as classical meta-analysis, which, of course, uses cumulative weighted averages of empirical results, which we shall see. Then there's the so-called meta-regression, which uses weighted regressions to explore moderator variables as drivers of heterogeneity. Then there's meta-analytic structural equation modeling, which uses structural models and path analysis to do the same in a very interesting way. Now, while all these are very fruitful and very big angles, I'll just concentrate on the first and the second for this discussion. Now, the main purpose, of course, for each of these is to integrate, for example, this one is to integrate effect size for multiple studies in one pooled effect to draw overall conclusions, okay? Then for meta-regression, of course, is to quantify the impact of factors moderating variations across studies. And of course, as well as assessing for biases, okay? Then in terms of common effect sizes, in here, we normally extract correlations, mean differences. And we shall see, I'll show you the formulas and then the application in the softwares. We can also extract elasticities. Okay, so these are possibilities, okay? Because each study, when it studies reporting, they are normally reporting correlations, they're reporting means, they're reporting, so we normally calculate mean differences and Cohen D's, for example, and the standardized means. And then of course, elasticities. And then you have regression coefficients, partial correlations. These can be used for meta-regressions. And then of course, elasticities. Now, all these are reported in studies, in primary studies, okay? And therefore, when we are doing meta-regression, for example, we'll be extracting these from those journal articles. Okay? For meta-analytics, for example, we, in most cases, use correlations. Very important. Okay? Now, you can get some guidelines from these guys, Borenstein, Hunter, and Schimidi, of course, for each of these. And there are many papers which I will link to the presentation below for your perusal. Now, meta-analysis in finance and economics, of course, is very popular. You have this as example because, well, my field is finance, so I thought I should give you some examples here. You have Piedmont and Daniskova, 2019, meta-analysis of the new Keynesian Phillips curve in developed and emerging economies. Another one is central bank independence and inflation in transitional economies, comparative meta-analysis with developed and developing economies. See, this is from economics. This is from finance, firm size and stock returns, a meta-analysis. This by Astakov, Avnave, and Novak, 2019. And all these are recent studies. Then you have Bachile, a meta-analysis of impact of privatization on firm performance. So there are many papers published on these angles. So these guys decide to make a meta-analysis out of these studies. Then these are trends. So which means these are trends in publications in finance and economics. So the area is growing exponentially, you can imagine. Okay? Now, how to do a meta-analysis? This is a summary. Stage one, you simply establish your research subject. That's the dependent variable. You must be aware of the dependent variable. It could be, for example, firm performance. I'm using that as a simple example. Or if you are from a field of human resource, it could be something like employee performance. Or maybe in education, it could be something like student performance in physics or student performance in history, anything, okay? So that is your dependent variable or your subject. Then stage number two, that's search and collect relevant primary studies using keyword and the selection criteria. Now, this is systematic literature review embedded in stage number two, okay? Then you extract and code estimates from collected article to establish effect size. Now, this is meta-analysis per se, which we shall be looking at, how to do the effect size and how to quantify. Then stage number four, meta-analysis of the extracted estimates, okay? In which case we do the actual meta-analysis, okay? And then we determine the statistical significance of the meta-effects, of the meta-effect sizes, okay? Okay. So that's the general outline. So these are the steps again, which I'll not go through because of time. Obviously, we have to start with such questions that you want to address. And then that's the next step, study selection. This is the whole process that we normally do in systematic literature review. So I'll not go through this again. So I'll just go through somewhere here. Let's start here. What are effect sizes? Because these are the key things that you'll be dealing with. So an effect size is simply a value measuring the strength of the relationship between two variables in a population, or a sample-based estimate of that quantity. So it can refer to the value of a statistic calculated from a sample, okay? Now, example of these effect sizes include things like correlation between two variables. It could be, for example, correlation between performance and any independent variable, okay, of your interest. So other effect size could be, for example, regression coefficients in a regression model. Others are, for example, mean differences. So you calculate these ones from means, especially when you have groups, group A and group B, or you have, for example, independent variable A and X and dependent variable Y. So you have their means. So those are the means there, et cetera, et cetera. So you have many types. You can just Google them, but we'll show you a few of them. So what you need to extract commonly from these studies are the study design, discussion of study groups, diagnostic information, regressors, outcome measures. Those are the effect sizes, okay? Then I need to take you to somewhere here. We have to move forward somewhere. There are choices of models, of course, which I'll not discuss, but I'll just share the slides. Normally we have the fixed effect, the random effect model, and their assumptions. Of course, the fixed effect model, maybe let's start there. The fixed effect model assumes that the true effect of treatment or regressor is the same for every study. So that's the fixed effect model. These are the choices that we'll be making in your software, which I'll show you later here. And this is how you would normally present the fixed effect model, which assumes that the effects are common in all the studies, okay? And then you have the random effects model. The random effects model assumes that the true effect estimates for each study vary. So effects for each study is varying, okay? So that's the random effect model. And that's how you'd normally represent that idea there. So because of time, I'm simply running. And these are the difference here between the two models. But here, this is very important. Now, these are some of the common effect size that we normally use. The standardized mean difference, which is normally the difference between the first mean and the second mean divided by the pooled standard deviation, or the pooled variance, actually. Okay, you can do it this way. This is the Cohen D. Okay, so you'll have to extract the means for the two groups, all the means for the two independent variables, and then calculate the pooled standard deviation of the two means, and then find the D, the standardized mean difference, which is also called the Cohen D's, okay? You can also use the correlation as an effect size also, okay? Of course, where the Z, I mean, what am I trying to find here? Okay, the Z here, okay, this Z of X and Z of Y are actually found by taking the individual item minus their mean divided by the standard deviation, okay? Then you have your Z. Then this will be used to calculate the correlation, okay? But anyway, most of these issues will be done by the software. You just need to know conceptually what the formulas are saying, okay? So these are other ways to see how mean differences are calculated and how you'd normally get the pooled standard deviation. And you can see you'll be using the same information which are found in the articles. Okay? The numbers of within the samples, if you're talking of two groups, maybe it was an ANOVA or an independent test for two groups. So you have group 1 and 1, group 2 and 2. And then the variance for group 1, the variance for group 2. All these are reported, of course, in your study. And of course, you'll be including studies that you are able to include. I mean, to extract these information. Okay. So this will be your pooled standard deviation, which you normally put here. And then that will help you to assess your Cohen D. Okay. All right. Now, these are also formulas for correction of biases, because some samples may be bigger, some samples may be smaller. So these are formulas that can be used. But these are conceptual formulas. But we have what we call as the, we have the softwares which can compute these for you. So you don't have to memorize these or put these in your mind. All you need to know is simply to understand what these mean. So for example, G simply stands for Hedges G. Okay, that's Hedges G, which is a formula that we normally use to correct for biases from the Cohen D. So the way you do it, you take Cohen D times 1 minus 3 divided by 4 df minus 1. df, that's the degree of freedom. df is equal to n1 plus n2 minus 2, okay? So if you have 10, let's say, for example, it's 20 and then 15, that would be 20 minus 15 minus 2, that would give you how many? 3. That would be 3 for degree of freedom here. So out of that, you have 3, you have this, you have everything here. You multiply by the rest of the information that are there, and the D, which is the mean difference that we're able to obtain it here. Then you have your Cohen, your Hedges G, which is an alternative for standardized mean. Okay. Anyhow, all that complication should not trouble you so much. Let's just move to, this is another complication for correlation and how you would normally adjust and come up with Fisher's error, which is a transformed correlation. And then, of course, if you are using, I did not talk about this, if you're using binary regressions data, obviously you have to deal with odd ratios and risk ratios, okay? And the way you look at these is, for example, you have 2 groups, the treated and the control group. This is mostly applicable in controlled or experimental design of research, okay? So looking at event A and B and C and D within a single paper here. And this will be N1 and 2. That's for group 1, for group 2. So that will be simply be A divided by B overall divided by C divided by D. That will be equal to AD divided by BC, which means is simply A times D divided by B times C. That will give you the odd ratio, okay? Which you are going to extract from that particular paper and use it in your meta-analysis. Or if you need to transform it to correct it for bias, then you can apply this formula, okay, by applying the logarithm of this, and then you have this as your log odd ratio, etc. So now, maybe let me just move to, because of time, how to actually do it. Maybe before we talk about how to do it, let's look at some issues here, okay? Let's just forward, let's move forward. And then we'll find a way of combining what we are studying here, okay? Okay, let me move to meta regression analysis and the way you normally model this. Normally you would collect individual regressions from studies. Y is equal to XB plus error. For that will be the first regression. So you'll have several. This is the first regression from study 1. But also you need to realize that a single study could have several regressions. That is another possibility. So out of a single study, you can extract several regressions, maybe 2 or 3. But de facto, you should have each study with one regression at least. And then out of there, we are extracting some effect sizes, okay? Okay, some effect sizes. So first of all, maybe for those who are not very conversant with regression, you need to realize that in each of these regressions, you'll have Y, which is the dependent variable from the primary study. That measures the economic phenomenon under investigation. It could be, for example, corporate debt level, how inaweza kawa, for example, firm performance, our employee performance. Then the XB, that's a set of explanatory variables in the primary study. Now, these could be things like determinants of corporate debt level, and epsilon, that's the random error term, okay? So equation 1 is simply the simplest form of which. It could be complicated even more than that in terms of adding more variable. But B simply measure the magnitude and the statistical significance of a certain effect under examination. So for example, the impact of tax rates and corporate debt financing, that would be captured by the beta, okay, in the regression. Okay, so this is very important down here. From a collection of primary studies, we obtain a sample of estimates for beta, which are denoted as Bij. Now that's very important. Now, I'll take you forward to, okay, we'll be collecting the Bij, which are regression coefficients. Why do I say Bij? Because these are individual primary studies betas, okay? And the index J simply accounts for the fact that empirical studies in economics and businesses routinely report more than one regression parameter. So that's why we have Bij. Otherwise, we would have said Bi if we made each regression from each study. But now there's a possibility of one or more regression from one study. See, so you have an extraction of one beta or more beta, etc. Then you have to extract the standard errors of the betas, which are normally reported in the articles, right in front of the betas. Now, these standard errors, sometimes some papers may not report the standard errors. They may report the T statistics or something else, or Z statistics, or P. There are ways of converting the P statistics and the other things back to standard errors, okay? So those are there, okay? Now, but it's not the scope of this seminar because of time. I just want to rush and show you how to do it in the software, okay? So those are two important information that we are collecting, okay? First, the betas, the Bij, and then the standard error of the betas, okay? Then in terms of how you would normally model, I have skipped a lot of things. Actually, you have to start with theories and theorizing all these other issues. Like, this is the general model that you are expected to visualize. That is, in the Y, what you would normally properly call as Y on this left-hand side, you are actually now putting the betas of the primary regressions. Are you following? That's where now you have your betas. So in this case, in this, this one, that will be your gamma. That's the like the alpha in a normal regression, which simply stands for the total effects when all these other factors are held constant. Okay. Now, the standard errors will have to be loaded also as part of an independent variable. Okay. And then you'll have a set of heterogeneity or heterogeneous variables. For example, here, we account for publication bias by including the standard errors of the betas, which is this one, which are extracted from the articles that are published, as well as these ones are extracted from the articles that are published, okay? And then in the absence of publication bias, the observed effect size, that Bij, and their standard errors should be independent quantities. That's something you need to note, okay? That is, in the absence of publication bias, the observed effect size, that is Bij, and their standard errors, Bij, standard error of Bij, should be independent quantities. That is, they should not be related. By that we mean, if we were to do some correlation analysis between Bij and standard errors, we should have the lowest correlation as much as possible. That would be a way of demonstrating independence between the two variables, okay? Now, these other variables here, which is a summation of several variables, and these ones actually are things that are represented by the heterogeneities out of these studies, okay? Heterogeneity, which I think I've discussed them somewhere here, okay? There's what we call as differences of studies in study design, okay, and sample characteristics. So those are denoted by Y and Z. Sample design, study design and sample characteristics. So coming back here, these will stand for sample design, yes? And these will stand for sample characteristics. Okay. Study design and sample characteristics. Sample design and the same, study design and sample characteristics. Okay. So these ones are for methodologies, how methodologies are differing. So what we do, we would normally develop, this is for methodological differences. These are for study differences. So what we would do, we would normally develop a scoring sheet. Like, for example, you look at study number 1, you look at the methodology, okay? You try to score them in terms of which method did they use. Was it fixed effect or was it random effect? Maybe that's your distinction. Or was it logistic versus non-logistic? So you will create dummy variables for a list of methodological characteristics, okay? Then here you develop a list of study characteristics. For example, are these studied from developed countries? Are these studied, so if it's developed, maybe 1. Not developed countries, 0. Then are these studies, for example, published before a certain year or after a certain year? With reason, of course, maybe there was a huge market crash or something, maybe a war or anything. That could be a distinguishing characteristic of study. Or are these studies done by women or men or a mixture of those? So there are many characteristics. Are these studies published in a high quality journal or low quality journals? So there are many characteristics that you normally extract from a systematic literature review that you're going to quantify and put them in a way of binary variables, okay? Sort of dummy variables, okay? So that's how you would normally design your meta regression. I'll come to these diagrams later because of time. Then what? These are examples. These are popular softwares which you can use: SAS, Stata, SPSS, ARA, Revman, etc., etc. And then these are some of those characteristics, like, for example, is it a peer-reviewed journal? Is it a, what is the nationality of the author? What are the working affiliations? See, that will depend on the theory that is probing you to make that choice. Okay? Data frequency, currency denomination. These are other, for example, in finance and maybe accounting and economics, you may also look at currency denomination, in which the variables are measured. Is there a difference? Different financial crisis, before, post, or before, that you simply code. When was it published? That's the idea. All these are those types. The design, the definitions, for example, definitions of variables. How did each study define the measure of performance? Some, for example, would use return on investment. Some would use return on equity. Some would use return on capital employed. So all these would be source of heterogeneity in your data. These are just examples, but really some other examples are, for example, did study, for example, use in the construct of the variable, was it 3 indicators or 2 indicators or a binary measure or 4 indicators? You see, because you have several studies, then you'll be trying to compare, to create a variable based on that. And then you put these as part of those heterogeneity that you're going to use in your meta regression, okay? These are other examples. For example, in terms of methods, this was about measurements, then data characteristics, number of observations, degree of freedom, average sample, year, data frequency, things like methodological choices. Did the study control for endogeneity or not? You see, you want to control for that, because the fact that other studies have negative, others positive, those might be explained by some variations in the way methods were treated. Types of estimator, was it fixed? Was it random? Was it GMM? Was it GLS? See, all these type of estimators. Was it robust or not? See, publication characteristics, number of citations. Is it a highly cited article or not? Is it from a high impact journal type? Because that would tend to imply that there was a vigorous review. What were the data sources? Okay, were these secondary data, primary data, etc.? These all these are sources of heterogeneity for your moderators, which you can include in your study. It's really big. So this is an example. I don't know if you can see this. This is simply an example of a meta regression. I don't think it's seen here, but with a lot of study characteristics being included, okay? But I'll show some specific articles so that you can and see. I've attached here some sample articles which you can go through. All right. These are some articles that are using meta-analysis. Of course, these are some articles which I will share to you later. Okay, and these are some references. Now, let me now take you to, for the few minutes that are remaining, I think we have about 22 minutes. I'll quickly show you how to do this in a software. Now, you really need the following software, which is a free software, by the way. It's a free software, but very powerful. You can do all these analysis using
Slides.
Yes, I'm opening my software so that I can show you what I'm doing. I have moved it to some practical session now. Okay. It's loading. It's loading so that I can share this in the screen. Okay, it's coming. Okay. Okay, so this is, I hope you can see my screen now. Can you see that?
Yes, doctor.
Now, this software is called,
Can
you read it?
The division, there's a V word, others is the empty.
It's called Jamovi. Okay. Jamovi, okay? It's called Jamovi. It's a free software. It's very powerful. I think somebody is making some noise, I don't know where. Help us fix. So this is called Jamovi. This is, it's called Jamovi. Now, in Jamovi, you can do a lot in terms of meta-analysis. You can actually do even other analysis, factor analysis, regression, all these types. Okay? It's powerful, probably because it's based on R programming language. It's very powerful. Now, it's free. You can just go in the Google and simply download it and then use it. Okay, so the first thing you need to know, I'm going to use some sample data here for meta-analysis, okay, as part of demonstration. Now, hey, the screen has stopped. I hope you don't see me. Let me go back again. Let's start sharing. I hope you can see that. I have loaded some exemplary data here, and the way this works is very simple and very intuitive, okay? Here it's a data view, because this the way data, you can edit your data here. You can go here, for example, double click and edit your data for each of these variables, okay? You can import your data, for example, here from Excel. If you want, you can import from Excel and go and browse. And then it will simply upload your data. I have already prepared my data here. Then you can manage your variables here. You can go to this plus sign here and add modules, various modules that you can use in your analysis here. So I have already added my module. Especially, I'm going to use this module, which is called Measure. Now, Measure is used for meta-analysis. Okay, we are going to use med mode for mediation and moderation analysis tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So make sure you download this and they are ready. Then, of course, structured question measuring can be done by using SEM here, among others. Okay. So, because now we are doing meta-analysis, what you do, you have your data view here, and then you simply come here and find your models, Measure here, and come here and choose the type of analysis you want to do. Okay. Let's say you're using correlation to analyze your data. Okay. I'm going to close this probably, this form analysis. Let me just move to the next analysis. Now, the way this works, it is responding in real time. Okay. So what you would do, you have here a list of your study. Okay. Normally, the way we do it, we list the study and the year, study and the year, the study and the year. Then the sample size, and then you can have some other characteristics. Then you have the, for example, here you have the effect size in terms of correlation. And then if possible, you can have the quality indicator of each study. You could have more information, okay? Some characteristics of the of your studies, like for example, the publication, when was it published? Year categories in terms of, for example, here, looking at this variable, the publication were categorized into 6 categories, okay? All right. Et cetera, okay? These are just some examples. So the way you do it, you simply come here and say, Measure, and then correlation, for example, if you want to do some correlation analysis, and then you pick your correlations. In this case, this one, you shoot them to the correlation box. But before okay, then that will load there. And then the sample sizes of the individual studies, you put them there. All right. And then the study labels, which are these ones here, you put them there. And then this will be loading. So the way this works, it loads in real time. Okay. It does not, you don't need to go and search this and that, it simply loads. You change anything here, it loads and they update automatically, which is the beauty of this software. So here, you have your results and they'll give you the model and their estimates, the standard errors, the p-values, the lower confidence interval, the upper confidence intervals. That is the intercept. Okay? Then the heterogeneity statistics will be indicated here. For example, here it is significant, meaning that these studies are heterogeneous. Okay. Then you have this plot here, which is called the forest plot. Then, of course, you have some options here. You can decide to change the way you display this. Now, let me check. some option here. You can enlarge it, for example, so that it's a medium probably, or maybe large so that it is readable. Okay. Then you can include some other tests, like, for example, pickup tests, some uniform tests. You can see? You also can include the inverse, the funnel plot. Maybe it's you want it as an inverse, which is this one here. Or you can just give it this way. Okay, which is actually used to detect publication bias. Okay, so we are actually expected to have all these daughters are the individual publications. Now they're expected to be within this, but when you have some areas that are empty, that's an indication that there are publication biases. Then you can have some model fitting weights. Then you can add some moderators, because these are the diagram there. You can have some moderators. You may add some moderators here. So for example, you want to add some continuous moderator. So you come back here and pick, let's say, quality of the study and put it here. Then this will update and show that the quality of study is a statistically significant moderator, and it is negatively affecting the correlation estimate or the effect side for that matter. So the way you interpret these, I have contained them in my slides step by step, but in a nutshell, this is simply, I want to zoom this, but it's not zooming. Where? So these are outputs. These are heterogeneity statistics. These are outputs that you can put in your article for your publication, etc. Okay. Pick up. Then you have other options, like, for example, let me see one here. Maybe let's try some other one, because the types, you could do some mean difference, which is probably one of the commonest. Mean difference. In this one, I'll have to load a separate data. Let me check here. Okay, let me see. This one. Okay. So with this one, you're actually doing some group analysis, which means you'll have to have the number, the mean, and the standard deviation from each of the study. Okay. So for example, in the first subsample, you have group one sample size, group one sample size. You put it here. Group one mean, which is this one. Then group one standard deviation, which is that one there. Then group two sample size, which is should be somewhere where. This one actually, and two, group two sample size, that should go there. This should not be there. This is N1 actually. And then group two mean, that should go there. Group two standard deviation, that should go there. And then the label, this is very important. You have your label here, study label, okay? And then,
Really, Jay?
yes.
Where are you going?
Are you asking a question?
You have to say so before going. You are still in the class.
Hello?
Yeah.
What are you saying?
Sorry, there is
Somebody
interruption.
speaking.
Sorry, doctor. Sorry, doctor. There is interruption.
Hey. Let me see. Where is that? Oh, wait. So, no moderator, categorical moderator. Do you need one? Application probably. And then, okay. Let me visit my data first, okay? Oh, it's empty. There was no data. That's the problem. Okay, let's go. Let's find some data first. Let me get my data first. Import. We have this data here. Let's see the data. Yeah, this data. This is for correlation. Then this one for what? This is this one was using for meta regression probably. Let me check that. Okay. Wait. Open. Okay. Anyway, so that's the idea there. You have your sample. Maybe let's just load some new data because for simplicity. Okay. Let me scan this data and know how this behaves. Let me find the new data actually. Where is that? Okay. Now here. Let's just import. You can import from sorry. Open. This thing is hiding here. Okay, now I can see. Browse. Let's just use this one first. Okay, so these are our data. We have mean, N for group 1, mean, standard deviation. Then you have N for group 2, mean, standard deviation. Then quality of publication. So we need really to change this data. This is nominal, is text is okay. That's the first data there. Then this data is cannot display.
Yes.
Let me stop and then share. Okay, let me go there. Here. Can you see it? Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so here we can change all these variable in terms of their measurements, measurement types, the continuous variable. Okay. Then These are continuous variable, all of them, etc. Data type, we can decide whether they're integer or decimal. Let's just assume they're all decimal. And then you close this. And then you come to your analysis here, measure. Then you may do some mean differences. So what you do, you take N1, mean, standard deviation, and then into standard deviation, and then we may include the quality as a moderator and the study name. Okay. So it's still not working. Some values I think are not, let me see. Let's see some values here. There's some missing probably. Missing data, do you have? Okay. No, missing data, yeah. Okay. Let's go there. In the analysis here, major, start this one. So to give mean standard deviation, that is this here. And then the start label. And next, we forgot to go to the specifications here. Display model fit. Moderator, yes, we have one. Continuous moderator. Yeah, that's what we're missing. So we have it there. Then our plots should have predicted intervals, model fitting weights. The plot, we want it large. We want to determine some publication biases. Yeah. I hope you can see the screen. And show these diagrams. Yeah, then you have your tests, the lower equivalent bound, Cohen D, etc., etc. And show that also. Lot of influence diagnostics you can show for each individual study. And all these are statistics. Anyway, because of time, we are not going to be able to explain everything, but the way you interpret, this is an example here now, looking at the way, this is called the forest plot. And in this one, you have each individual study. And these are the effect size for each individual study. And these lines are showing the confidence intervals. The size of the dots indicates the size of the effect size, effect size. Okay, the bigger the effect size. These are the confidence intervals. But then, of course, you need to realize that this is the scale. It's running. In this case, for example, it's ranging from 1 to negative 1.5, and then these are the confidence intervals. Then the statistics are here. The heterogeneity statistics, of course, the Ikaiki information criteria, Bayesian information criteria here, are all here. The larger these are, the better. Of course, then the heterogeneity statistics is not statistically significant, implying that because the null hypothesis is homogeneity, okay? Therefore, the alternative hypothesis is heterogeneity. Of course, in this case, we assume homogeneity because we failed to deny the null hypothesis. So the P is 0.815, okay? And then, of course, here you have publication bias assessment. And then this is the funnel plot, which would normally report the publication biases in a visual way. Empty places indicate the presence of possible publication biases as a result of, for example, language. Maybe you do not include studies from other language, let's say Chinese or Spanish or French, or maybe you did not include some study from some other countries which should have been included also, etc. And these are the assessment that you normally look at. And now, because of time, maybe let's just end there. But each of these individual statistics or diagnostics will tend to tell you how each study is deviating from the rest. This is Cook D distance, which means study 11 is deviating a lot from the rest of the studies. This is covariance of the R, showing how studies are deviating from the mean, I mean, from one, some above, some below, etc. So, and this is your QQ plot, which assess the normality of your dependent variable. Now, this is how you normally do for the classical meta-analysis. Now, because of time, let me finish with the other one, meta-regression. Although we have done a little bit of it here with one moderator here, this can be conceived as one of that because the moderator was not significant here. But in another phase, you could actually include many moderators as much as possible, especially if you're using the normal regression, which you can just do a regression like here, for example, a linear regression, and then include your dependent variable here and your covariates, which will be the study characteristics, okay? You just regress them normally. The betas would go here as dependent variable for each study, and then the covariates would be the study characteristics. They could be study characteristics of methodological characteristics, which are heterogeneities, okay? And then you simply run and then build your model and see how. Yes, got a question. Any question? Oh, it wasn't a question. Then you could use also JASP, which is another small software, very powerful also, to do actually meta regression. This is the last one I'm showing you so that we close up and have some questions. Now just here is also free. You can simply download it and use it. I hope you can see my screen. Now the way you do it, you have some menu here, then going this way, you have meta-analysis here, okay? And then, first of all, for this to be active, you have to pick some data. Yeah, you may open some data file, for example, from your computer. Let's say, yes, some questions probably when we are winding up. Any questions? Any questions? Do you have any questions? You don't have questions.
Yes.
Let me go to recent file. Let me use my library. Okay. There are some data which you can use for practice. Meta-analysis. Let's use this one. This is the data. So immediately after you're loading your data, then this becomes active. So you come here, meta-analysis. You can do the normal classical meta-analysis. It will do the way you want it. So here you put the effect size from your regression. Let's say, for example, effect size in this way. In this case, you have ES. That's the individual collected data from the meta regression. Let me show you. I mean, from the individual regression. This would be the individual studies. Okay, here. Study 1 up to 13, these are the years, etc., etc. And then the ES here are the effect size, these ones. which are betas, which were extracted from each study. I hope you're following. And then these are characteristics of the study, the individual studies, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm using that as an example. So here you put the effect size standard errors, okay, which are SE here. You insert them here. And the moment you insert them, this is calculating. And then here you can put study labels. For example, here, these are the authors, study label. And then your covariates or factors, see? These could be, if they are covariate, they have to be continuous variable. If they are factor variable, they have to be either ordinal or group variable, okay? Like binary variables, okay? So even these signs are showing that this is ordinal, this is categorical, this is continuous, okay? So let's say you have T-pos, these, let me just go for these as covariates. You have them here. And then these ones, I could have these as factors. Okay? Oh, sorry. Oh. Let's remove some of these. So what is happening here is that now you have the output here, the fixed and the random effect model. Here you can choose whether you are reporting which one. Okay. But in this one, you have the coefficients now of your meta regression. You have the estimates, you have the standard errors, you have the Z, you have the P values. Some are significant, like for example, this one and this one, which indicates that these are factors which are significant in this meta-analysis, okay? And then you can do some things here. Actually, you can come here in the model and do some more specifications. You can decide whether it should include an intercept or not, but also you can add some fit measures, model fit assessment measures, okay? A forest plot, a funnel plot, confidence intervals, covariance matrix, test for funnel portrait asymmetry, regression test for funnel portrait asymmetry. All these can be included, okay? And then these can be observed here, easily observed here. So you have done. Something went wrong here. I'm sorry. Let me go back. I'm rushing the time, so that's my biggest problem here. Separator is invalid for atomic. Some accidental that I've done something accidentally here. Let me see. Presenting here is very difficult. Okay. Okay, right there. Okay, let me do some. Okay, something went wrong there. Okay. All right. Okay, these are our results now. So you have classical meta-analysis. You have these are regression. That's the meta-regression output. You have the p-value here. You see the normal way you would interpret them. Then the model statistics are here, which test the fit. These are fit measures. Then residual heterogeneity estimates are here also. Then parameter convergence are also indicated here. Then you could also have your funnel, your forest plot here. You could also have your Okay, this is a forest plot. This is a funnel plot. This is measuring publication biases, but this one is trying to measure the strength of the effect size. In this respect, the effect size are heavily on the left arm of the analysis, which is actually the independent variable, the dependent variable, okay? In our correlation analysis. I mean, in our meta analysis, okay? So anyway, that's how you would briefly do this through a software, but you could also even use the normal regression window like this one and put all your information here and then do the analysis. That is also possible, and do some model check, like for example, autocorrelation, collinearity, plot, distance, etc. So maybe let me just end here. This can be copied, by the way. These outputs can be easily copied and put into Word documents, or these can be easily copied. So they are not difficult to deal with. You can just copy these and send them there. And the beauty of this is that the tables that are generated are APA standard compliant, which means you don't need to do a lot of editing. You just pick and send them there. Any question? I think I should end there for today. It was a hassle, probably going through and running. Any questions? Do we have any questions? Can you indicate which types of Jamovi we are to download? There are several Jamovi. Well, the cloudy Jamovi, this one is if you're using, it's a web-based. If you want, you can do that. But simply go to the Jamovi website, okay? And then download the solid version. The most current solid version is the best, okay? The solid version, okay? Download it for your window. You can do the same for JSP, for this one, okay? Okay, thank you guys. Sioni swali lolote. I don't see any more question here. Do you have any more questions?
We are still digesting. We can ask you later.
Okay, I think I'll send you some notes for you to digest further and see how you can incorporate this in your theorizing and in your process of publication. Otherwise, thank you
Can
for
you
your...
also send
Yes.
can you send the first session recording, please?
The what?
The first session recording, the Friday session.
Oh, okay. I'll deal with that, I think, tomorrow because of time here. We are a bit tighter. I'll send it tomorrow. Thank you. Okay. Others, thank you for your participation. We will we will continue tomorrow, same time, same hours, same place. Thank you.